It's early March in Glebe House Gallery and Gardens, and we're in that comfortable place, that wonderful place, in between the pages of winter and spring. You'd be forgiven for thinking it is still winter, for the little frosty patches in the shady parts of the lawns are still there, and the bare branches that are above us. But we know that it's spring. We know there are plenty of signs of spring, and we can hear some of those signs of spring. One of those signs, one of my favourite signs that starts early in the year, is the song of the song thrush. That pulse of energy coming through the air, touching your eardrums. They start off in early February. They start announcing that I made it. I made it through winter. I'm alive. I'm fit. I'm strong. And they're calling out to all potential mates, this is my patch. This is where I want to have a family. And they're calling out to potential rivals, that this is my little bit of the Glebe House Gardens. This is where we're going to rear the next generation. This site, these lavish gardens, are set in the foothills of the Derryveigh Mountains, right up in the northwest of Europe. So the Derryveigh Mountains to one side, rolling off into Glenveigh National Park, and on the other side the gardens are flanked by Loch Garten, those deep still waters, which of course are at the head of the Lennon River catchment. The same waters that drip off the branches around us and drip down through the gardens here, end up into Garten Lake and going through townlands such as Trenta, Kilmacrennan, through the mighty Loch Fern, down past Ramelton and eventually off into Loch Swilly and the Atlantic Ocean. Those signs of spring are really starting to show here, but we're still waiting on the green wave. And the green wave is something that was first noticed by astronauts in the space station. It was a green wave spreading across the northern hemisphere from March onwards, when all the buds, the trillions of buds, started bursting across southern Europe and spreading up through Spain and up through France, and eventually they hit around about this time of year, in the next week or two, into Cork. And then this area up here in North Donegal is about 2 to 3 weeks behind that, as all the buds start to swell, burst out, and that beautiful new green that we will soon see emerges. A real sign of spring, early spring, or that transition from winter into spring, is catkins. And catkins are the flowers on certain types of trees. Willow trees have catkins, alder trees and hazel trees, all of which are native. And hazel trees, often they're one of the very first signs that spring is coming, one of the first optimistic signs that the seasons truly are changing. These long, yellow, dangly catkins are full of pollen. When I flick them with my finger, pollen comes off. These plants are wind pollinated. And when the catkin is swollen and it's ready, it needs a little puff of wind, and that pollen then will land on the tiny, tiny red flowers. Those red flowers no bigger than a match head. And once the pollen lands on the flowers and the flowers are fertilised, those flowers will of course turn into next season's hazelnuts. Much like our native trees that are coming into flower, a lot of the non-native trees are starting to wake up too, are starting to respond to that extra light, that extra energy that is coming out each day. This tree is a larch, and larch is a conifer tree. A conifer tree is a tree with cones, and there's cones that hold seeds. But larch is unusual because it's a deciduous conifer. Deciduous being, of course, where it drops its leaves for the winter. So we can see the little buds that this year's leaves will emerge from. But before those buds burst out, the flowers are already here. And it's well worth, if you're passing any larch, well worth having a little look, because there is beautiful deep reds inside these flowers. These flowers, of course, will be next year's cones. So spring really tightens its grip and the soil warms around us. The celandines and dandelions that have already emerged and are there for the new queen bees that have come out of the soil and are humming around us. Those celandines, those dandelions, are joined by the likes of the golden saxifrage, these beautiful carpets of delicate yellow flowers that are all around us. And not just the golden saxifrage, the pungent smell of garlic, wild garlic, or ramsons as it's often known, is all around us at the moment, filling our nostrils. Its white flowers will pop out in the next couple of weeks, ready to feed so many hoverflies as well as other pollinators that are starting to emerge in the gardens. And a little precursor to that is the wood anemones, carpets of it around here. Glebe House have left lots of areas that are wild, lots of areas for native plants to thrive and to get going and provide food for all of these, as well as having manicured areas with some very beautiful plants, some very beautiful vegetative structures, and areas for us all to enjoy. The damp and shady parts of the garden, they have their secrets and their little signs of spring too. Underneath this tree, in the shadow here, this beautiful fern, the hart's tongue fern, is emerging. Its little fiddlehead's just starting to uncurl in its rush to put up its new leaves to try and gather as much of that new sun's energy. The hart's tongue fern responding to the energy just like the liverworts and all the mosses that are around here, some of the most ancient plants on the planet, doing what they have been doing for many, many springs, for literally millions of years. One month on, as we roll into April, the green wave has finally arrived up in Donegal. You can see the hawthorn here with its bright, bright green leaves just popping out, just emerging, having enough energy now, enough daylight each day for them to be able to grow. This hawthorn, most likely planted by a visiting thrush, as it's underneath a tall canopy of trees, is rushing to try and grab the light before all of that light is closed, all of that canopy is closed, and all of that sun's energy is absorbed by the bigger trees that are around it. The leaves at this stage are at their most vulnerable. Soon they will change colour, they will darken as they are pumped full of various different toxins to put off all of the different kind of insects that would love to eat them up. Right now at their most vulnerable, but also at their most beautiful, growing and swelling each day, a little bigger, ready for the summer that's to come. Our non-native trees are responding to the change in seasons as well. The mighty beech tree above us, its buds are still closed, but starting to swell as it drinks up more and more water from all around us here. The sycamore tree, this young one, has already popped out its leaves, and you can see the delicate nature of them. They're so soft, but swelling, getting bigger and bigger each day, eventually getting bigger than the palm of my hand. And then, just like the hawthorn, they too will darken as they protect themselves from the various bugs and characters that would like to eat them up in the summer. A lot of the species in the gardens here are adapted to wetlands and adapted to very damp soil, and as they have to be, of course, being at the edge of Gartan Lake. And we can see as the lake level rises and falls, we can see the little flood lines that are left behind, all this nutrition being brought in, brought out and recycled. Some of the specialist species that don't mind being submerged for a while have also joined the spring party. The likes of our marsh marigold, one of the buttercup family, is out, and it can quite happily tolerate being completely submerged for quite a few days. And it's got its bright yellow flowers joining in with that yellow season, trying to attract those first bumblebees that love the yellow colour so much. Like so much of Irish nature, so much of it is small yet very beautiful and is well worth a closer look. You can see the pollen sticking up, you can see the bright shiny yellow petals of this marsh marigold, which is attracting the bees in. And once the bees have pollinated, once they've moved the pollen from one flower to another, you can see the seed ball inside. And some of them, like this one here, are starting to swell. They have already been fertilized, already been pollinated. And these seeds, they will get bigger and bigger until eventually they drop off and turn into next year's generation. Wetlands have their fair share of signs of spring too, like this wet woodland down in the lower parts of the gardens. All of this fresh water draining down slowly through here. And of course these ponds and small streams capturing so much extra nutrition, capturing anything else that should be filtered out before it heads off into the Lennon catchment. And in this still fresh water are thousands upon thousands of little eggs, little frogs' eggs, frog spawn. Last month, the frogs emerged from their winter slumber, and the very first frogs were the males, and they scented the air, they picked up the chemical traces, and they made their way back as best as they could to the pool that they were born in. And they waited there, and when they got there they called, and they croaked, and they croaked, and they called out, and the females followed shortly afterwards. And when the females arrived, well, then the great race began, and the females will lay up to 2,000 eggs each. And then the males have a battle amongst themselves to try and be the first to fertilise those eggs. Both males and females have now gone, they've distributed, gone on with their business of catching flies all around the damp grounds. But meanwhile the frog spawn is waiting patiently for a little bit more light, a little bit more energy for it to wake up and those first tadpoles to emerge. You can see, you can feel and even hear the dampness that's all around us. This bit of lawn is half moss as well as grass and wildflowers. And that moss, it retains the water and it helps purify the water, it helps clean the water before it heads out into Lochgarten. A plant that thrives in these damp grassland conditions is the cuckoo flower, or the lady smock. And the cuckoo flower starts to emerge in April time, same time as the cuckoo starts to come back to our shores. And it is coming out just in time for one of our earliest butterflies. Very soon we will start to see the orange tip butterfly take to the wing. It's a beautiful white butterfly, the male has orange tips on it, bright orange tips. And they will breed and the female will lay its egg onto the cuckoo flower. And that egg, as it emerges into a caterpillar, then will eat the cuckoo flower and then protect itself over the winter time and emerges next year's orange tip butterflies. So the timing of the two are crucial. Without the cuckoo flower, the orange tip butterfly would not have a food source for its caterpillar. So it is emerging just as the cuckoo flower emerges. All of this nature linked together in perfect harmony. And one of nature's wonders that so many associate with spring is of course birds and their song. The dawn chorus is now growing and growing at this time of year. And is growing because birds, they recognise that extra light, that extra energy, and all of that extra food that is starting to emerge. And of course they're going to start nesting soon. So when the birds sing, it's the males that are singing and they're establishing a territory and they're telling all the others of their species that they're fit, they made it through the winter time and they're here ready to be able to breed and pass on their genes. And the birds that have been singing for the last couple of months as winter turned into spring, like the song thrush, like the robin, like the chaffinch, they're now being joined. They're being joined by sandpipers down along the edge of the lake. Other characters that have come from Africa, like the willow warblers that like to nest low, or the chiffchaffs look so similar but such a different sound that like to nest higher up. All of these species are happy in Glebe Gardens around here because of the variety of habitats and of course the way that they're managed. Having these wild areas of dense vegetation in amongst all of the manicured gardens provides a habitat for many different types of birds. And areas that we have just around us here could have willow warblers or robins low down, chaffinches or maybe hedge sparrows a little higher up, and then also could have blackbirds higher than that again, and then wood pigeons, which we can hear calling behind us, right up on the tops of the trees, forming apartment blocks of birds all around us, supporting all of that life. We've seen so many signs of spring, so much of that yellow that the bumblebees like, so many white flowers all coming out, all of the trees starting to burst their buds. But around us here in this field, where it doesn't look like there's much going on, just underneath my feet, this area has been very cleverly managed by the gardeners of Glebe House and Gardens. Underneath my feet are the first of the yellow rattles that are going to start to come out, the ragged robins and so many other wildflowers that will transform this area come the summer and the summer's heat into a wildflower meadow. And with that summer's heat we'll be joined by bumblebees, hoverflies, butterflies and many different birds, all relishing in the area that is managed here so well for nature.